I'll never forget that day, not as long as I live. It's the kind of moment that twists your whole world upside down in an instant. The kind you think only happens in bad movies or other people's lives. But it happened to me. Me, David Miller, a man who'd spent his entire adult life working hard, loving deeply, and trusting fully. And suddenly, in the most fragile state imaginable, just 2 days after heart surgery, I came home to find everything I believed in shattered. Let me start from the beginning so you get why it hit me like a sucker punch. For the better part of 15 years, I worked as the IT manager at Halstead Enterprises. It's a mid-sized tech firm that had grown steadily but never caught too much public attention. I wasn't the flashy type. No fancy degrees from Ivy League schools, no big speeches or awards. Just a guy who showed up early, stayed late, and made sure our networks ran smoothly so the business didn't skip a beat. I was proud of that. Proud of what I built quietly behind the scenes. At home, I had Emily. We met in college, fell in love, and built a life together in a quiet suburb of Cleveland. She was my rock, smart, caring, and fiercely loyal. We never had kids, but we shared everything else. Our home was modest but warm. I thought we were happy. I thought we were solid. Then the heart attack happened. It was sudden and unexpected. I was 42 and had no prior symptoms, no family history that anyone knew of. One evening, I just felt this crushing weight in my chest, the kind of pressure that makes you think you're about to die. Emily was the one who called 911. She stayed with me, held my hand, and whispered over and over, "You're going to be okay." I wanted to believe her. I had to. The doctors told me I had a severely damaged heart valve, something that had gone unnoticed for years. They said I was lucky to be alive, but I needed surgery fast, or the next heart event could kill me. The next few days were a whirlwind. Tests, scans, consultations, and then the surgery itself. It was risky, but I had no choice. I had to fight. The night before surgery, Emily stayed by my side, tears in her eyes but trying to stay strong. "We're going to get through this," she said. I nodded, though I was terrified. I thought about work, about the projects I was leaving unfinished. I thought about the life I might never get back. When I woke up in the ICU, the pain was intense but manageable. The doctors smiled and said the surgery was a success. I was alive. The first 2 days were tough. Breathing tubes, monitors beeping, nurses coming and going. But I held on to the hope of going home soon. Finally, on that cold spring afternoon, the doctor said I could leave. My body was weak, but my spirit was ready. I wanted to see Emily, to feel the comfort of my own bed, my own space. I imagined her waiting for me with open arms, maybe a gentle meal prepared just the way I liked it. Pulling into the driveway felt like a breath of fresh air. The sun was low, casting a golden glow over our little neighborhood. Birds chirped in the trees, and the faint smell of freshly cut grass floated through the open windows. I reached for the door handle, but it was slightly ajar. A small detail, but it set off alarms in my head. Emily never left the door open like that. I stepped inside slowly, the floor creaking under my cautious steps. The house was too quiet. No sounds of the TV, no soft music playing in the background, no voices. I called out, "Emily?" My voice was hoarse and weak from days of silence and struggle. No answer. Heart pounding in my chest, not from pain but from dread. I walked down the hallway toward our bedroom. I held onto the walls, my legs shaky but moving forward. The familiar scent of lavender and linen filled the air, but something was off, an uneasy tension I couldn't place. Then I opened the door. What I saw felt like a bad dream. Emily was there, lying next to Tom Granger, my boss at Halstead Enterprises. They were tangled in each other, laughing quietly, faces close and intimate in a way that left no room for misunderstanding. I froze, disbelief rooting me to the spot. Tom's head turned slowly, his eyes locking on mine. There was no surprise in them, no apology, just a cold, hard look that cut deeper than any knife could. "Oh, you're still alive?" he said with a smirk, as if my survival was an inconvenience or a joke. I wanted to scream, to shout, to ask why, but my voice failed me. All I could do was close the door quietly and retreat back into the hallway, feeling smaller and weaker than I ever had. Emily didn't follow me. She didn't speak. She just looked down, unable or unwilling to meet my eyes. That night, I lay in bed, the surgical pain mingling with the raw ache of betrayal. I thought about every time I'd stayed late to fix an issue, every time I'd missed a family event to meet a deadline. I thought about the trust I'd placed in these two people, the woman I loved, the man I respected, and how they had thrown it all away. I realized then that surviving the surgery was just the beginning. The real battle was about to start. Because some wounds cut deeper than the scalpel, and some betrayals are harder to heal than any illness. The moment the front door clicked shut behind me that night, I felt the weight of everything crash down all at once. I was still weak from the surgery, still trying to get used to the way my chest ached and how every breath felt a little harder to take. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the gnawing emptiness inside. I had spent years building a life, a career, a home, and somehow, in just a few moments, it all came crashing down. That cold, cruel remark from Tom, "Oh, you're still alive?" echoed in my mind like a slap I couldn't shake. I sat in the living room, the dim light from the street lamp outside filtering through the blinds, casting long shadows that flickered like ghosts on the walls. The house was quiet, but my mind was anything but. I kept replaying the scene in my head. Emily in bed with Tom, the look on his face, the way he didn't even try to hide the disgust or the superiority he felt over me. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. A gut punch delivered when I was at my most vulnerable. I wondered how long it had been going on, how blind I had been, how foolish I must have looked. For a long time, I just sat there in silence, letting the flood of emotions wash over me. Anger, disbelief, heartbreak. The pain of the surgery felt distant now, replaced by something colder and sharper. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the hurt and the shock, a small ember began to glow. I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. By the time the house finally grew still enough for me to think clearly, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Tom head on. Not yet. That would be reckless. He was powerful, cunning, and had a team of people ready to protect him. I needed a plan, something that would hit him where it hurt without giving him a chance to fight back. And I knew exactly where to strike. The company's financial system. Over the years, I had quietly maintained and monitored much of the IT infrastructure at Greenfield Corporation, especially the systems dealing with financial data and reporting. I wasn't officially in charge of security, but I knew the ins and outs better than most, and that knowledge was going to be my weapon. I dragged my old laptop from its hiding spot in the closet, the one I had tucked away while recovering from surgery. The machine was outdated but still powerful enough for what I needed. I booted it up, the screen glowing faintly in the darkness of the room, a beacon of hope and determination. I sat down at my desk and began to think. First, I needed to gather evidence, hard proof that Tom had been embezzling funds and covering his tracks for years. I pulled up every file I had saved over time, vendor lists, payment records, emails, contract approvals. It was a mess of numbers and names, but with patience, patterns started to emerge. Shell companies with addresses that didn't exist, payments made to vendors linked to Tom's family members, invoices that were suspiciously inflated or duplicated. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It was corporate theft on a massive scale. Millions of dollars siphoned off, hidden behind layers of deception. The realization fueled a quiet fury inside me. This wasn't just about me and Emily. This was about every employee who worked hard and trusted this company, about the shareholders, and about the reputation of the business I had helped build. But I couldn't just expose this in a straightforward way. If I handed over evidence directly to the board or the authorities, Tom would have time to cover his tracks or discredit me. No, I needed something more subtle, something that would reveal the truth in a way that couldn't be ignored or erased. So I started coding. I wrote a virus, not the kind that destroys or crashes systems, but a carefully crafted program designed to infiltrate the company's quarterly financial reports. My code was meticulous and precise. It would quietly replace certain numbers, those linked to the stolen funds, with glaring red flags, making it impossible to overlook the discrepancies once the reports were printed and signed. I worked on that code night after night, my fingers trembling not just from the medication and weakness after surgery, but from the adrenaline and determination coursing through me. The small room where I worked became my fortress of solitude. Outside, the world moved on, but I was locked in battle with Tom, fighting silently in the shadows. Each evening, I tested the virus in a secure virtual environment, making sure it wouldn't trigger alarms or corrupt unrelated data. The last thing I wanted was to harm innocent employees or cause unnecessary panic. My goal was exposure and justice, not chaos. As I coded, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. From a loyal employee who had spent over 15 years dedicated to this company, to a man betrayed and sidelined, now transformed into a vigilante working in the shadows. I thought about Emily, how devastated she must have been, caught in the middle of this nightmare. I didn't know if she was complicit or simply a victim of circumstance, but for now, I kept my distance, focusing on the bigger picture. I also thought about the future, my future. Was I risking everything by doing this? Absolutely. If caught, I could lose my career, face legal consequences, or worse. But sometimes, when the scales of justice are so heavily tipped, you have to be willing to walk through fire to make things right. So, I kept at it. Day after day, I refined the code, added layers of encryption, and made sure the virus would activate just in time, right before the next quarterly report was due. I imagined the look on Tom's face when those reports came back, signed and sealed with his signature, all while showing a glaring hole in the company's finances that no one could ignore. And through it all, I remained silent. I told no one, not a single soul. My revenge wasn't about noise or confrontation. It was about patience, precision, and quiet power. The night stretched on, and as the clock ticked past midnight, I finally leaned back in my chair, exhausted but resolute. The virus was ready, the stage was set, and soon the truth would come out of the shadows and into the light. The night before everything was set to go down, I was a bundle of restless energy, even though my body was still weak and fragile from the heart surgery just days before. I lay awake in the dim light of my small home office, the soft hum of the old laptop fan, the only sound breaking the silence. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, nervous yet determined. I had spent the past 2 weeks writing and testing the virus, meticulously crafting it to slip through the company's security like a ghost, silent, invisible, deadly in its precision. This wasn't some reckless hack designed to crash systems or erase files. No, I was after something far more surgical. The virus I wrote was a masterclass in subtlety, designed to manipulate the accounting software's internal ledgers, just enough to reveal the $12 million missing without alerting anyone to its existence. It was a ghost in the machine, altering numbers so carefully that it would look like a simple accounting error at first glance. But upon deeper inspection, the truth would scream from every page. I had spent countless nights poring over the company's financial systems during my tenure, and that knowledge was now my weapon. The software was proprietary, with layers of encryption and checks built in by the IT department. But every system had its weaknesses, and I found mine buried in a seldom-used subroutine that no one thought to protect. The virus exploited that gap, rewriting transaction data, shifting millions off the books, and recalculating the totals, all without tripping the internal alarms. At exactly 6 a.m., the virus was programmed to trigger automatically, right before the finance department began their final reviews and printed the quarterly reports. Timing was everything. If the virus kicked in too early or too late, it would be noticed. But if it ran right before the reports were generated, no one would suspect a thing. The numbers on those reports would bear the official company seal, the signatures of the executives, and the cold, hard reality of millions lost. I checked and rechecked my code again that night. My hands trembled slightly, not from the pain of surgery or age, but from the weight of what I was about to do. This wasn't just some data tweak. This was a line in the sand, the evidence that would blow open years of deceit and theft. Outside my window, the world was still dark, the only light the occasional flicker of a street lamp, casting long shadows over my desk. I felt alone, but strangely alive. The past days had been filled with bitterness and betrayal, but now, purpose filled that void. This virus wasn't just revenge, it was justice in binary form. When the clock finally struck 6 a.m., I watched the code execute on the secure network I'd set up. My screen showed the process logs, every step completed flawlessly, every transaction rewritten exactly as intended. The system didn't flinch, didn't flag any anomalies. It was seamless. An hour later, the first printed reports began circulating through the company. Crisp official documents headed straight to the desks of the CFO, the board members, and the external auditors. Each page bore the unmistakable signature of my boss, Tom Richards, marking his approval, unaware that he was effectively signing his own downfall. I pictured him sitting at his mahogany desk, scanning the pages as the realization hit. $12 million missing. The numbers didn't lie. The theft was undeniable. And on those very pages was proof he had signed off on it, whether out of ignorance or complicity. My phone buzzed quietly, a message from a trusted friend still inside the company. They're talking, board called for emergency meeting, shit's hitting the fan. I didn't respond immediately. I just sat back, took a deep breath, and let the moment wash over me. Months of planning, pain, and silence had led to this. But even as I felt the tide turning, I was painfully aware of the risks. If anyone connected the dots back to me, if they found out I was the architect of this viral attack, I could be facing not only termination, but criminal charges. I was walking a razor's edge. The thought of going back to the hospital, this time for something far worse than surgery, haunted me. Still, I refused to let fear rule me. My family, my health, and the future of the company depended on exposing the truth. And in that moment, alone in the early morning glow, I knew the virus was more than just code. It was the weapon I needed to fight back against betrayal and corruption. By mid-morning, rumors of the missing millions were spreading through the company's ranks. Employees whispered in hushed tones, executives hurried from office to office, and the board was already convening behind closed doors to assess the crisis. The company that had once felt like my second home was now a battleground. I remained in the shadows, watching as the foundation of deceit began to crack. The quiet virus I had unleashed was shaking the very core of the organization. And for the first time since waking up from surgery, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. Control over a situation that had once seemed hopeless. Control over my future. Control over the truth. The morning after the altered quarterly reports hit the boardroom table, the entire atmosphere at Grayson Tech was thick with tension, the kind that sticks to your skin and makes even the air feel heavy. Word of the $12 million missing had spread like wildfire among the top brass, and I could almost hear the uneasy whispers behind every closed door, the sideways glances, the barely suppressed panic. I wasn't physically there. I stayed in the quiet solitude of my small apartment, nursing my heart and watching it all unfold from a distance. But I knew what was happening inside that polished boardroom. The company's most powerful figures, the very people who'd spent years running the place with an iron fist, were now scrambling like cornered animals. An emergency board meeting was called, not the usual scheduled session with predictable agendas, but a crisis gathering where reputations were on the line and loyalties could shatter in an instant. The room was a battleground of whispered accusations, cold stares, and tense deliberations. I imagined Tom Richards, my former boss, sitting at the head of the table, pale-faced and sweaty, trying to play it cool as board members grilled him about the glaring discrepancies in the reports. He was caught between two impossible choices: admit to knowledge of the missing funds and risk jail time, or deny everything and watch his credibility evaporate. The board wasted no time in launching a full-scale internal investigation. They brought in forensic accountants, external auditors, and legal counsel, the kind of experts who could dismantle every transaction, trace every penny, and find the smoking gun. I knew this meant they were taking it seriously, but it also meant that the company was ready to throw anyone under the bus if it kept their own hides clean. Executives close to the CFO were suspended immediately, my old department head included, all under the guise of protecting the integrity of the investigation. Behind that, I sensed the slow unraveling of a carefully woven web of corruption that had reached further than anyone outside the inner circle had realized. Meanwhile, Tom tried to contain the damage publicly with a bland statement about reviewing financial controls and committing to transparency. But inside the walls of the company, panic was spreading faster than wildfire. Investors were demanding answers, and the stock price took a sudden dive that sent ripples through every division. The media smelled blood. Within hours, local business reporters had caught wind of the scandal, and news outlets were circulating headlines about Grayson Tech's $12 million mystery and executive scandal rocks major firm. The PR team was in full damage control mode, but I knew the truth couldn't be smothered by press releases or empty promises. Throughout all this chaos, I stayed quiet. No phone calls, no interviews, no public statements. I had learned long ago that patience was my greatest weapon. Revealing myself now could have blown my cover and let them paint me as the saboteur rather than the whistleblower. But every time I checked my inbox or glanced at the news, I saw how my virus had shaken the foundation of a company built on lies. I felt a grim satisfaction in knowing that the man who greeted me so coldly just days earlier, who mocked my survival and betrayed my trust, was now struggling to keep his empire from crumbling. And yet, even in the middle of all this, I couldn't let my guard down. I knew how ruthless corporate politics could get. Retaliation wasn't just a possibility. It was a certainty if I slipped up or let my guard down. So, I stayed in the shadows, gathering intel from trusted allies still inside, ready to move when the time was right. The fallout wasn't just professional, it was personal too. I thought about my wife, the silence between us thicker than ever, and the future I had once imagined now fractured beyond repair. But this was about more than heartbreak. This was about exposing a corruption so deep it had threatened to destroy everything I cared about. As the investigation continued, the company faced the harshest scrutiny in its history. Board members who once ignored warning signs now demanded accountability. The executives who once ruled with impunity were now on edge, watching their backs and wondering who might be next. And me? I was no longer the sick man who'd returned home to betrayal. I was the silent force behind the storm, a quiet reckoning, waiting for the next move. The weeks after the board started digging deeper into the scandal were a whirlwind, but for me, they were a strange blend of turmoil and opportunity. In the corporate world, word travels fast, especially when a big fish gets exposed, and even faster when someone from the inside flips the table like I did. My virus had shaken the very foundations of Grayson Tech, and while no one outside knew it was me who made the call, the ripples reached far and wide. Almost immediately, my phone became a revolving door of calls. Recruiters from rival firms, cybersecurity firms, even some unexpected names from industries I'd never considered, all vying for a chance to bring me on board. They were all practically falling over themselves with offers, six-figure salaries, stock options, promises of autonomy, prestige, even power. Some even hinted at corner offices and key executive roles, flattering me as if I'd become some kind of corporate messiah overnight. But the funny thing was, none of it felt right. It was flattering, sure. Who wouldn't want to be swept up in such an offer? But it wasn't what I wanted. I sat on my couch night after night, phone in hand, sipping coffee, thinking through every pitch. The offers sounded great on the surface, but most were just bait. Jobs that came with invisible chains, promises of freedom that I knew would vanish the moment I asked uncomfortable questions. These companies wanted my skills, but didn't want me poking around in their skeleton closets the way I had done at Grayson. No, this wasn't just about a paycheck anymore. Not after everything that happened. I realized I wanted something more. I wanted real control over the systems that could make or break a company's integrity. I wanted to build safeguards strong enough to stop someone like my boss from ever pulling off another scam. I wanted to be in a position where I could ensure transparency, oversight, and accountability. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about responsibility. Meanwhile, things were heating up inside Grayson Tech. The board was scrambling to put out fires, dealing with the fallout from the scandal, the press breathing down their necks, shareholders getting jittery. The executives implicated were either on leave or gone, and the company's reputation was hanging by a thread. That's when the calls from inside started coming. The chairman of the board, a seasoned businessman with a reputation for playing his cards close to the chest, reached out through back channels. We started a series of discreet conversations that weren't easy. I wasn't about to walk back into that lion's den without guarantees. They knew my value, but I made sure they knew I wasn't a pawn. We negotiated hard. I was firm on what I wanted, a role with genuine authority over the company's information and security systems, direct reporting to the board, and independence from the usual political wrangling. I demanded safeguards, protections to ensure I could act without fear of retaliation, clear oversight powers, and the ability to audit financial data at any time. The board was in no position to refuse. They needed stability and accountability like never before. And after the crisis, they knew I was the right person to deliver it. When they finally offered me the title of Chief Information Security Officer, along with a detailed mandate to overhaul and safeguard the company's systems, I felt a mix of vindication and cautious optimism. It was a new beginning, but I knew better than to rush in without a plan. I spent days poring over the contract, making sure every clause reflected my demands: transparency, whistleblower protections, and a direct line to the board free from interference. I was determined to make this position one where I wouldn't just be a figurehead or a scapegoat, but a genuine agent of change. And so, while the outside world saw me as a victim of betrayal or an ex-employee who had been wronged, inside those quiet negotiations and long nights of contract review, I was quietly building a new identity. Not as a powerless man who had been blindsided by life, but as a leader wielding the kind of quiet power that can shift the course of a company. The offers from outside would have been easy money and less hassle, but they lacked the chance to really fix what was broken. Here, at Grayson Tech, I had the chance to make sure what happened to me and the company never happened again to anyone else. The power I was stepping into wasn't flashy or glamorous. It was steady, firm, and rooted in accountability. And most importantly, it was mine. Accepting the Chief Information Security Officer position was more than just a promotion. It was a fresh start after everything I'd been through. The first day in my new office, looking out over the city, I felt the weight of responsibility, but also a fierce determination to fix what had been broken. I insisted on full independence and the power to audit the company without interference. With a skilled team, we rebuilt the company's security from the ground up, focusing on transparency and preventing any future fraud. I held open meetings to involve employees in the process, showing them this was about protecting the company and their jobs. The board soon saw results. Reports became accurate, whistleblowers felt safe, and Grayson Tech's reputation began to recover. Most importantly, I reclaimed my dignity and found purpose in turning betrayal into a catalyst for change. This role wasn't just about justice. It was about building a stronger future. Looking back, I realized that despite everything I lost, I came out stronger. I'm still here, still fighting, and this time, I'm winning.